right. Welcome to One Revolution's Name Tags Chat podcast. Today, I am joined by Matt Feeney. I met Matt Feeney on a plane ride to New Zealand. We went down there and we were training with the Winter Park program down in New Zealand for a month. We were roommates down there. We've been friends for a long time. As a lot of you know, these chats are following our name tags presentations, our 4 S's of resilience. And Matt is huge in one of the S's, the S of community. He started a program or co-founded a program called Adaptive Adventures, where they're taking the sport to the people as opposed to making the people come to the sport. And you've done just about every sport, right, Matt?
Yeah, that's correct. Everything from scuba diving to skiing to downhill mountain biking, hand cycling, mostly individual sports. But yes, I've tried just about every sport.
How did this come about? Because you started out, you and I were training down in New Zealand, and you did some of the racing, and then you were working with the Winter Park program, which is really where, can we say that that's where adaptive skiing in this country really originated, at the Winter Park program?
It was definitely the epicenter in the late 80s, early 90s of adaptive skiing. It was the mecca. It was the largest program of its kind in the world. And as I found out after a couple years of training there, that there might be 6 or 8 inches of new powder, and they would scrape it off and be running gates, and they'd be like, "Well, where's Feeney? I think he's off in the trees somewhere." So I realized early on that I really, really loved skiing still, even though it was adaptive skiing. The racing thing wasn't quite for me, but I just absolutely loved the skiing, the independence it brought back to me and the feeling that I got from skiing. And then of course, trying other sports like hand cycling and water skiing. I just felt that the more active I was and the more sports I could get out there and try, the healthier and the happier I was. And that's what led me to start Adaptive Adventures. I thought, there's got to be other people out there that are trying to find a way to do these sports. And it really, made an impact in my life. So I thought I could try to impact others.
So you started, because you were a skier before your accident, right? You were
Correct, but not a ski racer. I was a freestyler. I was a bump skier, and I did aerials, and I was getting upside down on skis when I was 14, just doing all kinds of stuff, but just was never a racer. So when I got hurt and started learning how to monoski and then went to New Zealand with you, I thought I'd give it a shot, but I was never, it just never clicked with me. But skiing in itself, the whole concept of skiing was still a good thing. It still made my heart beat, and presented some challenges, as you know. I mean, monoskiing is not an easy thing to learn, and you and I picked probably the toughest sport to learn right off the bat. But as soon as they set the gates up and the courses, and we started doing that, it was very apparent that that was your niche, and that was in fact, I remember, competing against you, and I mean, it was almost like you had to fall for me to even be close to you in the gates. You were something else. And then I said, well, you know what? There's bump skiing, and there's tree skiing, and there's other kinds of skiing too. And then of course I got involved in teaching. Right. So yeah, my family moved to Colorado when I was 8 years old from New York. So I had to learn fast, catch up with my friends who'd been skiing since they could walk. And so skiing was always part of my life, since I was a little kid.
You did that little ski train thing, didn't you? Or not little?
Yeah.
Didn't you do that from Denver up to Winter Park?
The Eskimo Ski Club, it was mostly a bus.
Okay.
But occasionally when the buses weren't running or something, we would take the train, and we would go down to the Safeway right there, the grocery store, and buy a dozen donuts for 65 cents and sell them for $1 a piece to all the other kids. And that's what we did as kids. And then we went up, and I never took a lesson. I used the transportation up to Winter Park, and then I would, instead of going to my lesson, I would just disappear and go ski with my friends. And that's how I learned to ski.
Can you describe that train though? Because it's a train that goes from Denver up to Winter Park, doesn't it?
It does. They discontinued it for a while for various reasons. They brought it back a few years ago. I believe it still runs now. Yeah, it goes right. It's great. You can avoid, especially now with the traffic is insane from Denver up to Winter Park. What's normally a little over an hour can take you 3 hours now on a weekend. So the train is the way to go. But yeah, back in the day, we took the train a few times, and we had some shenanigans there. You can imagine a bunch of 10, 12-year-old kids riding up the train to the ski area.
Your parents putting you on the train, you riding up, taking the train home. I mean, it's like fully independent skiing back in the day.
Correct. My dad would hand me, I think it was $12. And that was for lunch, lift ticket, and the train ride.
What a good deal. That's awesome. Well, granted, this was a couple of years ago. And then talking about the heart, the getting the heart going a little bit. When you were in college, you joined a group of skiers too, didn't you? And wasn't there some sort of an initiation that you had to do when you were in college to join this group?
Well, there was a group of us that were just skiers, and yeah, there was a cliff that we all had to huck off of. It was, back then it was about a 20-footer, and you think back when you're 18 or 19, that was something. Now guys are just, they're doing double back flips off stuff like that. But yeah, there was a lot of camaraderie and a lot of pushing each other. Who can do what, who's the best skier, and but again, yeah, I set my classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays so I could ski on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and then on the weekends. And I also had a PE class called skiing. So I had to be up on the mountain every Thursday at 9 o'clock.
Well, you had to get credit, really.
I had to get credit. You can't miss class.
I'm sure that's the case. What was it like? So with Adaptive Adventures, what spurred you to make that work and to go with such a variety of different sports?
Well, it didn't start out like that. It started out more like, okay, if you're a person with a disability and you live in this country and you want to learn how to ski, even back then, 20 years ago, there were plenty of opportunities. You could go to not almost, but a lot of ski areas around the country had an adaptive program. And that's how I learned. I went back to Winter Park and I would take my lesson and then I would go home. And it just seemed like there wasn't any real socialization around it. I had already skied. In fact, you were only the second mono skier I ever met when we went to New Zealand. I never found anybody to ski with or to, kind of run some things by each other or learn from each other, that kind of thing. So, there was nothing social about it. And so one of the ideas behind Adaptive Adventures was not only traveling to different parts of the country, but different ski areas like, Jackson Hole and Telluride. Our first camp we did in Telluride was in 1999. Before that, the only ski camps in the world for people with disabilities were learn to race camps or race camps specifically for people who wanted to race. We started the first all mountain camp for people that didn't want to race. They wanted to just ski and they wanted to socialize and they on and off the slopes. And they wanted to ski, but not necessarily focus on competing and making the Paralympic team.
So what's an all mountain camp mean? Was there instruction or what were you guys just skiing as a group, or how did it work?
Absolutely, a little bit of both. I think it was a little bit of trial and error at first. We would break up into groups, and then of course these groups would change as the week went on because we didn't know, people's abilities, and so it was a lot of just kind of finding out what people wanted to do, and we always gave them options. Hey, if you want to go ski this type of terrain, go with this group. If you want to learn. And there were some good instructors at that point. When you and I were learning to ski in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, not only was the equipment pretty, subpar, the instruction wasn't there. And I'm sure you can relate to that. I remember you telling me one time you called Jim Martinson, who created the Shadow, and said, Jim, how do you make this thing turn? I mean, you could totally relate to that. And so first things first, when I became an instructor, I made all my volunteer instructors get in the ski for themselves so they could have a feel for, but anyway, it evolved. By the late 90s, I think we had a pretty good system in place to at least teach people how to ski in a monoski and advance things that you could create angles. Plus, by then, a shaped ski was there, which, as you would know, Chris, has really helped monoskiers as much as anybody. So, yeah, we did have some good instructors, but mostly it was just about finding your way and doing what you wanted to do and skiing how you wanted to ski. If you wanted an individual lesson or just wanted to go out and ski with a ski buddy, you could do that too. But we found that, in small groups, our first camp, I think we had 15 people. So we just put them in 3 groups of 5. And then we would kind of move them around as the week went on. And it was just so successful that word of mouth got around. And then next year we had 25. And wow. People thought, that what we were doing was groundbreaking, and it was a lot of fun. And I think everybody enjoyed it, and they still do.
What was the social part? You talk about the social part. How did that work? What were the benefits?
Well, because it wasn't all, life's not all about skiing. It's about, believe it or not, you can only ski so much, so, the après ski, we would have dinner together, and you could talk about anything from, hey, what's the latest and greatest catheter that's on the market that I'm using that helps me? Or, hey, have you tried this? Hey, there's a, and then right about that time, as like the one-off was coming out, the off-road hand cycle, just different things that people could turn other people onto, and talk about and discuss. And, hey, I'm having this problem, or how did you overcome this? It was just social, just anything you could think of that would come up in a social topic, we could talk about. And it wasn't just about skiing. And there were a few alcoholic beverages that would go around the room, and the stories got better. And I still keep in touch with people, that were at these camps 20 years ago, and we still laugh at, certain things. And so anyway, that's how it evolved. But yeah, that's what it was really about, is socializing and connecting with other people that are facing similar challenges.
Well, it can feel so isolating when
Right.
you have an accident, right? I mean, you have your accident and you feel like, to a certain extent, your life is over, at least whatever life you had beforehand. And none of your friends are in a wheelchair. I mean,
Right.
now they are,
Sure.
but back then, none of your friends. And so this is an opportunity to kind of get together and actually have peers. I felt like for me, I first started learning about my life in a chair when I started to compete. Went through the hospital, went through sort of secondary rehab and did some of those things, figured out how to get around and how to do a wheelie and how to take care of myself and do some of those things and stuff like that. But didn't really figure out how to move forward. And it sounds like that was a lot of what you guys did, was trying to figure out trying to be able to set a situation where you can have those conversations that you're not going to have with your able-bodied buddy.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, what's up with this? I heard about this. My doctor mentioned something. I read about something. What do you have? And did you have like a wide range of people in terms of sort of life experience and chronological experience in terms of time in a chair and those kinds of things, or
All that?
was it similar?
Yeah, all the above. Everybody was different. From, obviously the life of someone who has a visual impairment is going to be different than our life. Somebody who may be a quadriplegic. We've had a couple of quads show up at our camps, and we got them going. In fact, one of them ended up being a pretty accomplished monoskier, without the full use of his hands or triceps or any of that. took him a long time. But yes, people from all different walks of life. You know, most people really enthusiastic, wanting to progress. But you know, it's like real life. You get some other people thrown in there that might have been struggling a little bit, and you know, maybe had a negative outlook on it, but they were there because someone talked them into it. And I think it benefited those kind of people even more so, because they looked at what the positive outcomes could be. You know, they saw people actually enjoying their lives as someone with a disability, which, as you know, when you're sitting in a hospital after being told that, you know, you're not going to walk again, you know, having any kind of quality of life is pretty much a bonus at that point.
Do you remember any specific times where like the light bulb went on, where you just saw this person, him or her, you know, whoever it was, just the light bulb go on and go, oh, wow, okay, life is okay. It's all good.
Yeah, I've had that happen. I've had that happen quite a few times actually, where you can just see it. Where, and one of one actually that I can recall was a good friend of ours who recently passed, Danny Mativier.
Hmm.
Danny was a guy that just showed up basically on my doorstep in Winter Park, looking to borrow a ski. He didn't want a lesson. This was back in the mid 90s, and I was running the sit ski program at the time in Winter Park. Here comes this nice guy. He was hilarious, and he had this funny accent, and he was a character. And all he wanted to do was borrow a ski. And I said, I should probably put a volunteer with you. And he's like, nah, I got this. And he was struggling a little bit, so I put a volunteer with him. And he after about a week, he comes to me and says, hey, Matt, how much do I owe you for renting the mono ski? And I said, Dan, don't worry about it. You know, you're good. And he says, no, come on. Let me at least buy you a beer. So I go, okay. So we go to the bar, and he goes, I said, when are you leaving? He goes, I got to go tomorrow. I'm running out of money. I got to get back home. And I said, why don't you just stay at my house? And he says, well, I have a dog. And I said, well, I got a dog. And he goes, really? I could stay at your house? And I said, yeah, and I can even probably get you some comp lift tickets. We'll make it work. He ended up staying like a month and a half at my house. But I will say this, 15 years later, when he was going to the Paralympics in Salt Lake, well, it might have been 10 or 12 years later, but whenever it was, Dan sat down and wrote me a handwritten letter thanking me, that I still have it. And, you know, in fact, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it. But Dan wrote me a letter just saying how I made skiing really fun for him. And I made it accessible and available. Not only that, but I made it fun for him. I didn't teach Dan a lot about skiing, maybe a few, you know, pointers in the beginning, but he took that and he went off and got the bug and started ski racing. And, you know, that, you know, he just, but that's one of those stories where I just, you know, met a guy and all of a sudden he's going to the Paralympics, and he thanked me for it, for you know, helping him make that opportunity come true.
What a great thing. And you do have to pay a little bit of justice to that accent as well. People,
Yes.
Dan was from Rhode Island, but nobody could place his accent. And people are like, oh, are you from New York? Are you from, you know, you from Boston? And they could figure out it was East Coast, but it was Rhode Island. It was I'm trying to think of the name of the town. I can't even think of the name of the town right now, but he would come in and go, how are you? You know, and that was the beginning of every day. Probably it was every morning for you guys.
Yeah. And anyway, along the way, you know, you meet people like that, special people. And who knows, Dan probably would have gone on to do good things had he not stayed, you know, ended up staying at my house. But I cherish those memories, and people that, you know, just needed a little something, a little kickstart, a little, you know, and he saw how much fun I was having with skiing. And yeah, and there's some great stories with that too. So that was one that I will always remember because of the accent and because of the character that Dan Mativier was.
But some of these sports, like skiing, can be a scary sport. You know,
Sure.
you talked about scuba diving. I mean, some of these things, when you have a community, it makes it a little bit easier to do that, right? It makes it, I remember seeing, I mean, you talked about Jim Martinson, where I called Jim after my first day of skiing and said, how do you make this thing turn? But I also skied with him at the end of that season and watched him. And it was just this relief for me because because for the first time I realized that I could still ski, even though I'd skied almost every day that winter. I didn't know if skiing could be the same. And
Right.
there's a big distinction there between, it's like, oh, well, there's this cute little adaptive sport, or there's this real sport that's about doing what you need to do. And the thing is, with some of the groups you had, I'd imagine you had diversity in ability levels where some of these people are on the lower end and some of these people are on the higher end, and they look at the people on the higher end and go, oh, all right, now I see it. Now I understand how I can do it and I can talk to you and all of that stuff. Did you see people with that sense of being able to overcome that first sense of fear as a result of being part of this group?
Absolutely. They could realize that it was attainable, that somebody could ski. And you know what, along those same lines, Chris, every once in a while I'd, meet someone and they'd say, oh, they say, what do you do? And I go, oh, I'm a skier. And they're like, oh, you ski? And they give you a little pat on the back, and just so patronizing. It's so nice that they let you guys ski, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, come take a few runs with me, buddy. You see if you can keep up, that kind of thing. But it wasn't like that at first. And you and I struggled learning how to ski, but I think once the methodology came in there, the equipment got better, the instruction got better. But yeah, absolutely. That was part of the motivation for the camp, was you had the whole gamut. You had people that we didn't encourage never ever skiers to come to these camps. We always said, if you've taken a few lessons, at least if you've been in a ski, come ski with us. And I'll tell you, I've gotten some people from, their third day of mono skiing, they came to the camp and they were skiing some blue runs by the end of their fourth day, and had moved up quite considerably. And again, you see it in their face, you see it in their attitude. There's something, they're accomplishing something. They're doing something. Maybe they thought they'd never, like when you and I started, we never thought we would even be close to being, as good as we were when we were able-bodied. And I don't think it quite got there, but for me, it got closer than I thought. I mean, with my skiing on a monoski, got better than I ever thought it. If you would have told me that in 1989, I would have said, no, you're crazy. You mean I'd be able to ski everything on the mountain and ski in chutes and steep bump runs and all that kind of stuff? I didn't know if that was believable. But again, when people see that, when they're just learning, they see it's attainable, and you can set a good example for them. And and they get it. The light bulb turns on, and there you go.
Well, the light bulb turns on and their whole world opens up, right? You think,
Right.
oh, okay, I can actually do this. It might take a little bit of time. It takes some instruction. It
Right.
takes being able to see people who are relatively good. Were there any particular sports that made more of an impression on people than others? You talked about skiing, you talked about hand cycling, and you had a wide variety of different disabilities as well, right? So it wasn't just people in wheelchairs. It was blind and amputees and arms
Yeah,
and legs and all that stuff, right?
it was all physical disabilities. And believe it or not, the more I reached out and tried these other different adaptive sports, the one sport, and I don't even know if I'd call it a sport, it's more of an activity, is what you hit on, was the scuba diving. This scuba diving I've recently come to the realization that the ocean may be the most accessible place on the planet, if you think about it.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, anytime, because of the zero gravity kind of thing, you're out of, for someone like me, I'm out of my wheelchair, I'm free, I can go anywhere that any able-bodied person can go. Of course, there are some limitations with most adaptive sports or adaptive activities. There are a few limitations, but I can take someone who maybe they're very involved, and their disability is such that it's very, very challenging for them to do almost anything. But we can get them in the water with some help, and they can experience something that, not everybody can experience. So scuba diving is very freeing too. It's very liberating. So that's something that I didn't see it 22 years ago when I first got certified. But in the last 5 or 6 years, I've seen it a lot more. I'm trying to get more people certified and get them out there in the ocean. And it's a great sport for just about anyone with any disability.
And so it's that feeling of weightlessness. There's also like the meditative part of hearing the breath go, and it kind of relaxes you. And
it's a balance too of all this other crazy stuff that, downhill mountain biking and wakeboarding and skiing. Those are all, I hate to use the word adrenaline sports, but they're pretty high end, get your heart racing kind of stuff. And at first I kind of went into scuba diving kicking and screaming. I thought it would put me to sleep, quite frankly. Even though I love the water, I'm a pretty good swimmer. I just thought, scuba diving, I'll do that when I'm in my 60s. I was wrong, but I finally got talked into it and got certified. And it is a great balance between some of these other more physical activities that you do. And it is eye-opening, and you get to see things, and you get to travel to places all over the world, and there's beautiful beaches, and it's not a bad gig.
Well, that's something to be said for, right? You're not going to the cloudy, muddy, dark, cold place to go scuba diving. You're going someplace enjoyable, someplace warm. You were a diver though. That's how you had your accident, right? Was diving?
I was a springboard diver, not to be confused with scuba diving. I was a diver, 1 and 3 meter. Did a little bit of 5 and 10 meter platform when I was in college, but started out as a swimmer competitively when I was a kid, and it just something about diving. I was good on a trampoline. Like I said, I used to get upside down on skis, and I always felt comfortable in the air. So I was a diver in high school and All-American, and dove on the swim team in college as well. After my freshman year, they disbanded the swim team. So I started skiing because I was at a school that was 20 miles from the ski area. So, but yes, that's how I originally got hurt, was a diving accident. All I hit was water, very strange freak thing. I broke my 9th thoracic vertebrae.
What was that? I've never asked you this. What was that like? I don't remember. I had a skiing accident. I don't remember anything after my ski popping off. I was conscious, but I was in shock. But you were in the water. Like I was lying on the ground.
I was in 200 feet. Yeah.
Do you remember what happened?
Yeah. It's funny how I don't remember the exact impact necessarily, but when I think back to it, I can remember all of a sudden I knew I couldn't move my legs. I'm treading water with my arms, and my buddies are in a boat about 100 feet away. And it didn't look that bad to them. It wasn't like I smacked on my back. I arched my back when I went into the water, and it just cracked a vertebrae. But
because you went from pretty high, right?
Yeah. It was about 100 feet.
So that's enough to catch your attention.
Yeah, but see, what people don't understand is I was to the point where 65 or 70 feet was like nothing to me. I was doing 2.5s from 70 feet. I was doing double twisting back 1.5s from 60 feet. Always made sure the water was deep enough. Kind of thought I knew what I was doing, but I pushed it a little too far and just over rotated on a dive, and that was it. But yes, I remember that moment looking up, and my friends thought, well, that didn't look that bad, so hey, do that again, and I was like, hey, I'm hurt. And they didn't take me seriously at first. A guy that was in the boat used to lifeguard with me. He kind of saw a look on my face. He jumped in, he swam up to me and said, what's going on? I said, I think I'm paralyzed. He said, all right, let's get you in the boat. And we tried to do it the best we could. But yeah, it was all, looking back on it, the term surreal, I think, is overused too, but that's a pretty fitting term for what was going on at that point. And then the flight for life had to come, and I got my first helicopter ride, and they took me to
Lake Powell?
Lake Powell, southern Utah. There's a trauma center in Grand Junction, and they took me there where they took some x-rays, and then the next morning is when they told me that I was paralyzed, and I did a pretty good number on it. And I can't remember the exact terminology they used, but they said it was a long shot if I was ever going to walk again, basically.
Wow. But so you didn't have that panic in the water. I mean, you sound like you're pretty calm when you're in the water.
I kind of performed my own rescue in a way. I mean, my buddy was with me, but I was yelling to the boat, "Is there anything flat so I can lay on?" Because I was a lifeguard.
Yeah.
So I was calm because I could tread water with my arms, and I knew I could breathe. I was above water. I wasn't going to die. I just had to figure out what the hell was going on with my legs, or wasn't going on with my legs. So that was obviously the scary part, not knowing. At that point, you're still thinking, well, maybe it's just a little trauma. Maybe it's temporary. So they laid me flat on the boat. But yes, it was. And then, of course, even when they tell you that, you're like, oh, come on. How could I be paralyzed? I didn't, I just dove into some water. How could I be paralyzed? Then they showed me the x-ray, and then it starts sinking in. And oddly enough, when they said I was going to Craig Hospital, I had actually heard of Craig Hospital before that. But I'd never known anyone in a wheelchair. But I found out real soon, I wasn't going to Craig Hospital to get healed. I wasn't going to come out of Craig Hospital walking, which I think I did initially thought. I thought, oh, I'm going to the best spinal place in the country, in the world. I'm going to walk out of there. That's not what that place is all about. That place, if you have an incomplete injury and they can work with you, sure, you can get stuff back. But their real job there was to teach me how to live a life as a paraplegic.
And they do some interesting things too, where they had sort of that intermediate housing too there, right, at Craig,
Correct.
Where you're in the hospital and then you kind of have an apartment like right next to the hospital where you can kind of live on your own and see how good you are at
Right.
living on your own.
Right, absolutely. They had some apartments right across the street. So the last week or 10 days that you're there before they discharge you, they put you in this apartment across the street. Just, hey, just for comfort. If something comes up and you need to go back into the hospital, it's right across the street. And if everything goes well, then they send you on your merry way, and away you go.
So you didn't have aversion to water or an aversion to risk after your accident? Didn't engender that kind of worry you're feeling?
In fact, I started bungee jumping with some friends of mine that had their own homemade equipment. And I think you may have heard this story, but I went back one time and jumped off of the Dirty Devil Bridge near Lake Powell, at the top of Lake Powell. It was 250 feet from the bridge to the water, and the bungee broke. This was 3 years after my accident. So apparently I hadn't learned my lesson, but there was 150
that was after
pounds.
we bungee jumped. That was after we bungee jumped in New Zealand, right?
Correct. But I thought it was so fun the first time, and I was showing some guys some pictures of it, and this one guy says, "Oh, you got to come with us." This one friend of mine I worked with. I go, well, who do you guys jump with? And he goes, well, we do it ourselves. We buy our own gear. We hook it up. It's illegal. You're trespassing. But they had this book with all these bridges all over the southwestern part of the United States. And they would find these bridges, these suspension bridges, and hook up to them and jump off. And I'd seen videos of them, and I was like, this is amazing. This is really amazing. So I thought, okay, I went and jumped with them a few times. And then the one time I went, it actually broke. And thank God there was water underneath me. But But after that,
So what did that mean? It broke. So you didn't, I mean, you effectively fell 250 feet,
well,
but it
yeah,
also had slowed you down a
correct.
bit.
Correct. It slowed me down. I recoiled back up. Oh, I have it on video. It was so long ago, it was on VHS. I have it on VHS. So one of these days I'll dig it up if I want to laugh. But it's amazing. I mean, real quick, everybody else that was doing this, they would jump right next to where the bungee was attached because they would just jump head first or feet first. Well, I didn't feel comfortable just falling through the air without the use of my legs. So I like to do somersaults. I felt like I'm in control, at least if I get a little bit of momentum and I can tumble forward. So I would do like 4 somersaults. Well, in order to do that, they didn't want me to get tangled up.
These
in
are
the bungee.
tucks? Like, are you able to get in like a full tuck kind of
More
thing?
of a pike,
More
more
of
of
a
like
pike?
a pike
Okay.
position, because
Okay.
they wrap my legs up so they wouldn't be flying around. And so I would the bungee cord itself weighed 150 pounds and it's hanging off the bridge. So they had to hold me in place. And when I was ready to go, they would just basically let me go. And the weight of the bungee would pull me off the bridge. And so that's why when it broke, but they didn't want me to get tangled. And since I was doing somersaults, they didn't want me to get tangled up in the rope. So they moved me over about 20 feet from where the bungee was attached. That created a little bit of a pendulum, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's what ended up, making the bungee break. And I splashed in the water. And my first thought was, I got 150 pounds of bungee cord strapped to my body. I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
And finally, I came up for what I thought was my last breath to undo the last carabiner, and I looked around, and it was all floating. All the bungee cord was floating around me, 150 pounds. So I thought, okay, I'm not gonna die. So after that, I kind of said, maybe you ought to slow down a little bit with the craziness.
Was it for you? Was it that feeling of falling? Was that the thing that you really enjoyed? Because I remember bungee jumping and you get the bit of free fall and it's the stomach in your throat.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, okay. Because I also remember being sort of cocky to a certain extent once the bungee stopped, right? Because you're falling and then the bungee catches and then you bounce back up and you're like, oh, okay, cool. I'm good. I've done the whole thing. And then all of a sudden I was falling again. And it was the same sensation. Is that the thing that you like? Is that the thing that drew you to the bungee jumping?
I think so. And the fact that these guys were a little, they kind of had a screw loose, and I liked the cut of their jib. But it was it sounds funny, but they were very safe about it. They were all climbers, and they had, climbing harnesses and backup climbing harnesses. And they each had over 100 jumps with not so much as a scratch. What happened to me.
So you show up.
Yeah, then I show up and just ruin the whole thing, because I don't think they ever did it again after that. That was like, the funny part about it is there was guys in a boat down there that were filming it. They didn't know me. They knew some other guys up on the bridge. And they came up and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." And they're gathering up all the bungee cord. And they said, "Jump on the boat." And I grabbed on the side and I'm pulling myself up. And I asked the one guy, "Hey, can you grab my legs? I'm paralyzed." And he's like, "Holy shit, we got to get this guy to a hospital. He's paralyzed." And of course I said, no. See, that's my wheelchair up on the bridge. I'm already paralyzed. And they're like, they just shook their head and looked at me like, "Man, what's wrong with you? Like, you have a death wish or something?" So, but that was another story that just, I think it was kind of the adrenaline and just the fact that it was something different and something that other people weren't doing. And I got a kick out of it until that happened. And then it was like, okay, someone's trying to tell me something. And
Slow down a little, think about what you're doing. But was this part of, obviously not bungee jumping, but was this part of what you were trying to share with people with adaptive adventures where, hey, yes, you had an accident, but you're not damaged. You're not fragile. Because sometimes coming out of the hospital, I don't know how you felt. I came out of the hospital feeling like, if I sat on the wrong thing for a moment, I was going to have a bed sore and I was going to be flat on my face for 4 months to get the thing to heal. I felt totally fragile when I first came out of the hospital. Did you feel that? And is that some of what you helped with the people with the camps?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a little bit of that, the fear of the unknown. I mean, I had a hard time adjusting to it. And I think skiing really just, I turned the corner with skiing. Once I was able to actually make a couple turns and come down a run and then get on and off the chairlift by myself. It was moments like that I realized that, okay, I can still lead an independent life. I'm going to be fine. It's just going to be a little bit different. But you're right. At first, there's that sense of, you do feel a little bit frail. You don't know what your limitations are going to be and what challenges lie ahead. And so yeah, there's all that.
And how to solve those problems as well, right? Because I remember initially learning how to monoski or monoskiing and thinking, how do I get this thing to the snow? How do I get
Right.
this 35-pound hunk of metal that is totally cumbersome, that doesn't really want to sit on your lap or anything? First, you have to go and do a curl, put this thing onto your lap, trying not to damage your legs. But when you figure that out, you think, well, I can go skiing. That's it. I can leave my
Right.
house. I can get there, take my ski, get everything all set up, get in, go ski, come back, and I'll ski with people or I won't ski with people or whatever it is. I have the option. Is the independence, do you think that's the biggest thing for people? The biggest hurdle is recognizing that they can be independent?
That is a huge hurdle. And I hate to admit it, but back then, you even coined the phrase back then, the benevolent passerby. Every once in a while, you must rely on the benevolent passerby. You have to.
Was that me? That sounds like Sarah. Sarah Will, who, excuse me, would you like to help me?
No, but there are situations. Trust me, you and I are not, not that, we're more alike than you think in
Right.
some ways, because we want to be independent. We don't want to have someone help. But, now that I'm 57 years old, I'm starting to be a little bit smarter about the whole thing. If I don't have to pump my gas, I got a guy at the corner that'll come out and do it for me. There are shortcuts and there's certain things that I absolutely wouldn't have done 25 years ago. But by the same token, there were guys, like Michael Norton, who absolutely would refuse help. And even if it was up a flight of stairs, he would get out, hop up on his butt, bring his wheelchair behind him. That, you have to draw the line between being fiercely independent and being smart and being, a little more cognizant of the situation. So
I think that's it. But it's also probably something that you guys shared in your dinner time and things like that too, where you're sharing equipment, where you're looking at wheelchairs that fit better. I remember leaving the hospital with a chair that was 16 inches wide. I'm
Right.
now in a 14-inch wide chair. Just going from heavier to lighter, looking at how you're able to put your chair in your car and sharing best practices and best equipment.
It's all about that. And that's part of, when I talk about, socialization and camaraderie on and off the slopes and at any events that we do, it's all part of that. It's not just about the sport. The sport is kind of what unites us and brings us together, and puts smiles on our faces. But it's also about, hey, I'm having trouble doing this, or just taking a moment and looking over and seeing how another guy does something, putting his wheelchair in his car. It's amazing how little thing. I just got a new wheelchair, and when I still have to take the wheels off my, take the wheels off my chair to put the chair in my car. Mm-hmm. And I lift it up onto the footrest. Well, this new chair, the casters won't allow me to lift it up onto my footrest. So I didn't think about that before I got the chair, but there's so much to think about.
Hold on, let's describe that a little bit. So you kind of lift it up and you put it on the nose on the footrest.
Correct.
So for us, that's you're resting on it as you're able to take the wheels off. So it's a bit of a tenuous position sometimes, right? Because if something moves, then you can be on your nose quickly falling out of your car.
Indeed.
So this one doesn't work. So how'd you solve the problem?
Well, I'm still working on it. I did the chair. I've only been in the chair for a couple of weeks. I've figured out, I'm working on a few things to problem solve with it. But yeah, it used to be just, I would turn the chair around and then lift it up from the back axle onto the footrest. Well, now when I lift it up onto the footrest, the casters hit. So it's not stable. So I'm working through it. I just don't want to scratch, because otherwise what happens is the chair falls forward and you scratch it up on the pavement.
Yeah.
So my other solution to that is just get a bunch of tape and and tape up the front of my chair so it will get scratched. I mean, there's all kinds of things, the ways you can look at it, but independence is
painter's tape. Yeah.
Right, there you go. But I mean, independence is a relative thing. These days, I don't generally ask for help, but I do find myself accepting it every once in a while when someone asks for it, when someone asks me if I want help. When 20 years ago, I would have said, no, thank you. But so yeah, things change. You get smarter, you get a little older, and hopefully that's not such a bad thing to, if someone's offering you help once in a while to take it. I think that's probably the smart way to go. Because sometimes you would say, no, I'm good, thanks, and they would help you anyway. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it works both ways, right? We're talking about carrying the monoski. I was always amazed at how I was sort of struggling up the hill to get over, to go wherever I was going. And you're just like, okay, I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it. And you get right to the top of the hill, like you're just about to crest. And somebody says, hey, can I give you a hand? And you're like, where were you back there? Like back there, I could have used you. Now you just want the glory,
Exactly.
And now the chair thing, it's funny. I actually contemplated, because when you fly, that's exactly what happens too, right? They tip your chair up right on the front of your chair. And our chairs, granted, they are what we use every single day, but you got a new chair. It's like buying a new car. You don't want somebody to take their key, if they still have a key, and stripe your car.
Right.
It's effectively the same thing. And so I contemplated, I haven't done this yet, I'm still considering it, of actually going to a fabric store. I looked it up, but I didn't call them, I don't think, and buying like Kevlar fabric was what I was thinking, and epoxying Kevlar fabric just to that front part of your chair, like on the little bend where invariably that's where they're going to put it. And then I'd have a bulletproof chair, which would be awesome and hopefully never needed.
Makes sense.
But these are some of the things that you do. Was there anything that you saw that was at one of your camps that was like the craziest thing somebody had adapted in a way that you never would have imagined, that you went, wow, that is so cool and makes perfect sense now, but I never would have considered it?
Trying to think off the top of my head.
As you're thinking, I'll prime the pump to a certain extent. I went to Canadian Nationals up at Sunshine, and it was freezing. It was like 2-jacket cold kind of thing. And we were staying at the Banff Springs Hotel, and it had a hot spring underneath it. Banff Springs Hotel was one of those old time hotels where people would go for like the summertime, right? They'd take the train up back in the day with their locker, and they'd be there for the whole time. Therapeutic hot springs and stuff like that. So being so cold, we went down to the pool to go warm up. It was a hot spring. You go warm up and thaw out, hopefully. And so we went down, took the elevator down, and the pool was down one more flight, and it was actually down a flight of stairs. The elevator didn't service it. So I'm still a newbie. I mean, this is 1990. 1991, I think it was 1991. And I don't know anything. I mean, I'm still, I'm still isolated to a certain extent. I was in college. I was the only guy in a wheelchair in college. So I, everybody knew who I was because I really stuck out of the crowd. I mean, you talk about a minority. I was
Right.
one in 2000, right? Like, oh yeah, you're the wheelchair guy. Like, yep. And probably can't really hide about that at all. So these guys who I was with Kenny Lacombe, Eric Bandierley, who was SSAT back then, Dan, what was Dan's last name? From San Diego. I can't think of his last name right now. But with a bunch of these guys, they turned around, they grabbed onto the railing, they bumped down the stairs. I was, wow, that looks cool. Okay, no big deal. And did that, not thinking what goes down must go up. And so did the pool thing, got out, and Essa and Eric and Kenny had basically like a seatbelt, like a webbing seatbelt that they had made. And they just strapped themselves into their chair and climbed up the steps in their chair. They go back in an extreme wheelie and push on the step and hold onto the railing and pull themselves up. And I was like, wow, that's like, I never would have thought of that. And you probably have seen that stair climbing with Eric Kondo as well.
Well, and eBay still, he would do it with he had a locking brake so that
He does now. Yeah.
when he would pull himself up, it would automatically lock so he could re-grip. And he was really big into that. And yeah, my hat goes off to all those guys that can do stuff like that. I mean, I even tried it a few times and I was like, I don't think this is going to, I think I'm going to have to, this is going to be one of those things where I'm going to go, hey, yo, brother, can you help me up these 10 steps?
That's what I did that day. It was one of those like, hey, yeah, okay. So how about one of you in front and one of you in back, and we'll just do the Cleopatra thing and you can lift me up. But I did go and get webbing afterwards. And I don't know that I ever completely mastered it, but I definitely got to the point where I could actually do it. And then I saw Kondo, and Kondo came to Sarah, Will, and I used to do a camp in Vail, and you came to the camp in Vail, right?
Yep.
So we did. I know you and Joel came.
Absolutely.
And so Kondo, we were in the hotel. We were going to go to the gym across the street, and we went out, and there was a flight of stairs. And he turned around, and he climbed stairs like as easily in his wheelchair as anybody walks upstairs.
Wow.
And I looked at him and went, wow. And all he does is he grabs the railing with his right hand and his right wheel with his left hand. And he pulls with the right hand and pushes with the left hand and goes up like totally controlled. Will go down that same way, go down the steps, totally controlled. And so I watched him do this and I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like, that's awesome that you've done that. Right. And then it was my turn. And okay. And I sort of wobbled up the first couple of steps and then, okay. And then I kind of got it as I was going along. I'm like, okay, this is all working out. And then I got to the top and you just want to reach back a little bit further. The railing ends. You kind of have to muscle that last one. So I made the fateful mistake. I grabbed onto the railing with both hands and went to just kind of pull myself up. And of course my chair squirted out from underneath me and just tumbled down the stairs and stuff. But I'd imagine you've seen a lot of that kind of stuff. There's people who've adapted in such a way that you never would have.
Yeah, I remember, I can't remember who it was, but the first time I saw a guy go through a narrow doorway, I thought he would have to get out of his chair and crawl through and then take his chair apart. He said, nah, and he got up leaned up, took one of his wheels off and slowly inched through a narrow doorway with one of his wheels sitting on the side. And then he reached through, grabbed the wheel and put it back on. And I just looked at him and I went, that was amazing. I didn't even try that maneuver. I thought, that was one of those, don't try this at home. I thought I'd hurt myself. So yes, necessity is the mother of invention. And there are some people out there that can do some pretty amazing things.
What are you doing for fun or for fitness now?
Well, right now I am nursing a sore on my tailbone. I had shoulder surgery. It's a long story. I had pretty major shoulder surgery 2 years ago. And 5 days into my stay at the rehab center, I developed a sore on my tailbone, on my sacrum area. 30 years in as a paraplegic, never had a sore. And it took them 5 days to give me one there. So that healed up along with my shoulder. It was gone for about a year, and it just popped up about 2 months ago riding my hand cycle, and it was completely gone. So I kind of took it for granted that we're good. And riding those the Force RX bikes, when you're laying down, a lot of the sweat will run down towards that area. And apparently it's that, and the fact that I had lost about 12 pounds was the perfect scenario for the
Perfect
sore to come
storm
back.
right there. Yeah.
So I got on my bike for the first time in 7 weeks. I got on my bike Saturday and went out and rode. So I'm getting back into it. But to be honest, for the last 6 weeks, I have been laying on my stomach and my side and trying to get over this sore that, they warned you about those, when we were in rehab and at Craig Hospital back in 1988, they pounded that into you. Take care of your butt, take care of your butt. And I did for 30 years. And I was under somebody else's care when it happened, and couldn't really turn myself. And it was hard to self-advocate because I was on pain meds after shoulder surgery. So that's kind of what happened. And I'm hopefully won't take that for granted anymore. That spot on my sacrum will be compromised from now on. And but hopefully it won't, once it heals up again, I'll be smarter about it and I'll continue to ski and bike and do what I do.
Are you preparing for the ski season as well, right? You're looking forward to the ski season, being fit, shoulder fit, those kinds of things?
Yes. I'm a little apprehensive. But I still don't know what's going to happen with with skiing during the zombie apocalypse still upon us. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do plan on skiing. I don't know how much I'm going to do. I got in one day last year. I got to be honest, it didn't go so well. The skiing part, my shoulder was fine, but the pushing around and loading and unloading the chairlift still bothered me a little bit. So I had a PRP injection, as you did years ago. I had one done just about 2 months ago in my other shoulder. So we're still kind of hoping that I can avoid surgery in my other shoulder at some point too.
And so you've moved out of adaptive adventures now, but still, I mean, you still have to be involved with this kind of with some of this community, with some of the activity. I mean, this have to be some of your great friends that you've established with skiing and water skiing and all sorts of that kind of stuff. I mean, right now it sounds like you're not doing it, and a lot of people probably aren't doing it because of COVID. But will you continue to do that?
Absolutely.
With this group?
I will always be an advocate, not only and support not only adaptive adventures, but just adaptive sports and recreation. I mean, my name's out there. I get calls and emails still every week. I get contacted by people that want to know about, a certain activity or how to get involved, or it's slowed down obviously the last few months, but I still get them. I still get, questions, and people want to know about what's the best way to do this. I'm also still a mentor with the Christopher and Dana Reeves Foundation. So they point me in a direction every once in a while to mentor someone who might be going through a bad time or needs a little push. So I do stay busy with that for sure.
Definitely. Will you ski mostly, if you do ski this winter, will you ski mostly at Winter Park, or will you be all over, or where might you be?
That's another good question. Depends on where I'm needed. I always used to just travel to where, I used to go to, for 25 years. I went this last year, even though I only skied one day. I go to places like Deadwood, South Dakota.
Really?
because there's an organization there called Ski for Light, and they do an annual event, and they have a hill there with 1,000 vertical called Terry Peak. So I also created a camp in Duluth, Minnesota 16 years ago, a monoski camp out there that I will probably go to in February. So again, that's in Duluth. That makes Fraser look tropical in the winter. It's very, very cold, Duluth, Minnesota. But
Fraser, Colorado, which often calls itself the coldest place on earth, right?
yeah, yeah. Just we want people to come here and vacation. Why don't we advertise that it's just so cold? Yeah, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I go wherever I'm needed, and if I go free skiing, it's probably going to be to Winter Park, maybe a few days at Vail. I always try to get to Telluride when I can. So we'll see.
What's just on the way out? What's the best way for people to build a community? You've been somebody who's built a community. What's the best way for other people to do it?
I always thought it was, first of all, you just have to have a lot of passion and surround yourself with a lot of smart people that have that share your mentality.
And that's to have fun, I assume, your mentality.
Pretty much. Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you heal up quickly and get strong, both shoulder and sore. But this has been it's been great to connect with you and to hear your stories. And I don't think I'd heard that bungee story. So for people who watched, or people who watched a little bit, this will be on Facebook Live. So it's on Facebook Live now, but you can also go to the One Revolution channel and watch it in our feed, or you can go to the One Revolution channel on YouTube. These will all be housed there. They actually will be edited a little bit, so they'll be a little bit cleaner. Not that we had any real problems while we were here, but please go to the One Revolution YouTube channel or to the One Revolution page on Facebook. Matt, again, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to connect, and look forward to seeing you in person sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. My pleasure. And it was great talking to you and watching your career too over the years. Congratulations on that, and keep doing what you're doing. It's great to see.
Thank you, sir. Take care.